I'd just like to welcome you all to this rearranged NLP workshop. We had a Zoom update last time that locked people out, so apologies for that. And thank you, Lindsey and Sophie, for agreeing to come back and present what we know is a very, very important topic, something that I'm very closely interested in from personal perspective. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Lindsey and Sophie to do their discussion on how NLP can help recovery from eating disorders. So over to you two. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cash. Thanks very much. And, we'll introduce ourselves fairly briefly and then we'll get into the topic because there's lots to cover today. So I'm Lindsey Agness, and I did my practitioner in 1997, so quite a long time ago now. And then my master practitioner in 98, and then I became a trainer in 2000, master trainer in 2012. So I've been operating in the field of NLP, both in the corporate world and in the kind of personal development field for a long time, and written quite a few books around NLP as well. I'm also the mum of Sophie, who's here, and I'm here wearing two hats really. One is my NLP hat, and one is my role as Sophie's supporter over many years, suffering from anorexia. So Sophie, I'm just going to hand over to you briefly so you can introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Sophie. I'm a qualified trainer of NLP. I think I qualified in 2020. It's between 2019 and 2020. But I am also in recovery from a long-standing eating disorder, predominantly anorexia, but have experienced other forms of eating disorder along the journey as well. So together we've put our NLP hats together and knowledge that we've both learned about recovery from anorexia, and put this together for you all. So hopefully you will all have a takeaway from today of some description.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. So, we have been working probably over the last 9 months, I would say, on bringing together our NLP backgrounds and also our lived experience, both as a supporter and as a sufferer, and looking to develop some services in this area. And we've been writing a book as well called Beat Anorexia with NLP. So it's an area, it's a new area for us. I mean, we're not doctors, we're the first ones to say, we're not kind of professionals out there in the medical field, but we do feel that our experience, bringing all of those facets together, offers some ideas, because we know from our experience that sustaining recovery in this field is very challenging. And we've learned a lot from our experiences. So there's a few things we wanted to cover with you today. One is what causes anorexia in particular, because that's the eating disorder that we have the most experience of, although there are we'll cover some other eating disorders as well, because it tends to be quite complex and a kind of a perfect storm of things that can happen. But if you're somebody that wants to work in this area, I think you'll find that interesting. And then Sophie's going to talk a bit about how to spot some of those early signs. So if you know somebody or you have a family member, some ideas about what to watch out for. And then we're going to have a look at the approach that we're putting together, and have a look at how we're including NLP as the foundation of that approach moving forwards. There will be an activity a bit later on where we'll get you working on one of the areas. And also, this may be one of the few opportunities that we do encourage you to have your phones at the ready, because we use Slido. So, you know, when we've got a reasonably big group, it can be really a great way of collecting your ideas and your thoughts fairly quickly. So if you've got your phone there, keep that at the ready, because there will be several opportunities for you to feedback your thoughts. So just by way of background, first of all, I'm just going to go in and share my slides, our slides now. So just bear with me a second. Here we go. Right, so that's us, done that bit. Yeah, so just by way of introduction, I mean, Beat, who are the #1 charity for eating disorders in the UK, have estimated that about 1.25 million people have an eating disorder in the UK, although they do say that that's probably a big underestimate. You know, the number is likely to be much bigger. And about 8% of those people actually have anorexia. It's at a big cost to the economy, particularly with people having to go into quite long-term hospital care. And I guess one of the things that's always been, you know, as a supporter, always been absolutely at the front of my mind is that people with eating disorders are at an increased risk of suicide and death. And actually eating disorders have the highest mortality rate amongst psychiatric disorders, with anorexia having the highest rate affecting young adults. So, you know, we are talking about a very serious mental illness here, and looking at ways that we can start to help change that mindset. Because as you'll hear from Sophie, you know, it's up here. It's in the mindset that is the most important part to help that person change. So I'll be saying a bit more about those statistics later on. But what I'd like to invite you to do now is if you could go into, you can either just take a photo of the QR code or join us at slido.com, put in that code. And we're curious, we're NLPers, so of course we're curious. You know, are you somebody at the moment who's an active supporter of somebody with an eating disorder? Are you somebody who is a sufferer? I mean, all of these comments are completely anonymous, by the way. Are you curious to learn more? Or are you concerned about somebody? So, you know, it's interesting for us just to know what categories you fall into. So I see you found Slido, so that's good. Well done. So we've got, let's move this so I can see. So most people are curious to learn more. That's good. 11% sufferer, concerned about someone. I don't think we've got any active supporters here, but I'll just give you a couple more moments to put in your answers. But definitely we've got people here that are curious to learn more. And you know, maybe if you're already, you know, working in the field of NLP, you're somebody that you know, is interested to add this to the areas that you offer to your clients. So yeah, quite clear. We've got mainly people who are curious to learn more, one sufferer and one active supporter. Good. Yeah, so there's a clear winner there, and that's helpful for us. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to stop sharing for a second, and I'm going to invite Sophie just to share something of her experiences with us through her story.
So yeah, so hi all. I'd just like to welcome you to maybe just for a moment, just to sort of shut your eyes and try and sort of connect to my voice just for a couple of minutes, just while I take you on a bit of a walk through the beginning of my journey. So it's waking up, and every day is a battle against a voice that is never ending and it never quits. From the moment that I wake up, it's there. It's demanding, criticizing, and controlling. It tells me that before anything else, I need to go for a walk. Then what I can eat, what I can't eat, how little I deserve of a nice life because I've not done anything in the day to earn it. I haven't worked hard enough to make it even that little bit quieter throughout the day. That voice is never, ever satisfied. No matter how much I give, I can't, sorry, one moment. No matter how much I give, it's never satisfied. No matter what I do, I can walk for hours, I can starve myself, and it's still there. It's always there. I'm never ever enough to satisfy the voice. It's always questioning, why did you do that? Let's go for another walk. Let's restrict more tomorrow. Do you really need all of that? Should you really be having a nice time? I'll let you eat that. I'll let you do that. But whatever you do, you just need to do more in order to earn it. Even at night when I'm physically and mentally exhausted, my mind will still race. Starvation can keep me awake, my thoughts spinning in endless loops of guilt, shame, fear, and the dread that I will still need to wake up and do all of this again tomorrow. The eating disorder doesn't sleep, even when I'm desperate for it to. It's a constant consuming presence that steals my energy, my peace, and ultimately my life. And yet I cling to it because without it, I don't know who I am. It's my safety and my security. I didn't question or doubt it. It had always been there, whispering rules, adding new rules, shaping my every thought, every decision, and every bite. It told me that it was my protection and that it was the only way that I could stay safe, the only way that I would ever be enough, and the only way that I'd be loved and accepted. And I believed it. Even as it tightened its grip, even as my world became smaller and smaller, I clung to it. It's every word, it's every whisper. It had become me. It had merged. It was my identity. Then about 3 years ago, something snapped. The suffocation became unbearable, the exhaustion undeniable, and the will to go on was diminished. The voice had stripped me of everything until all that remained was an empty shell, and that was my shell. And in that desperate moment, in the midst of the darkness, another thought, but one that was not born from the voice, but that was born from me, emerged and said, I need help. What will happen if I just asked for help? The voice recoiled. It was furious, spiteful, and full of rage. It threatened failure, weakness, losing control, of losing everything and everyone around me. But the first time, I wasn't willing to listen. With shaking hands, I reached out. I dialed a number that I'd stared at countless times before. I was uncertain and I was terrified. But to my astonishment, they answered, they reached back, and they were willing to help. Thank you for listening to that. And we will now take you on the journey of NLP and eating disorders.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Sophie. And I think, you know, for me as a mum and as a supporter, the realization of the struggle and the battle 24/7 was an enormous realization for me, and probably the start of our journey to look at, you know, how we could support Sophie in the best way. So thanks for that, Sophie. And what I want to do, I'm going to go back into our slides now, and I want to just share with you some of the common myths around eating disorders, and just to try and challenge all of them. One of the big ones is that, you know, eating disorders are a choice. You know, it's something to do with social media, and young women out there are wanting to look good. And one of the things, the points that I really wanted to make is that they are not a choice. You know, they grow and they become a serious mental illness. And there are a number of risk factors that I think it's useful to understand about. And we've certainly learned a lot about these in our research. And these risk factors, I mean, for everybody, it's different. And, you know, it's a combination of those risk factors that come together. Oh, has somebody got their audio on? I'll carry. Sorry, there was a bit of noise in the background. So there's 3 sets of risk factors. One is a biological risk. Second is an emotional and cognitive risk. And third is a social and environmental risk. And, you know, for a sufferer, they may not experience all of them, and they may well experience elements from each of these. And first of all, you know, the biological risk, and it's very interesting because when I learned about this, it kind of was a bit of a kind of light bulb moment, because one of the biological factors is around preterm babies, and preterm babies, apparently the research is now saying, can have more behavioural difficulties as they grow up, and obviously eating disorders is one of those. And Sophie was a preterm baby. She was born at 34 weeks. So that to me was quite an interesting one. And secondly, the current evidence suggests that there's quite a genetic factor, and that 50% of the risk can be if somebody else in the family, parent or sibling, has had or has a mental health disorder or mental health condition, or has experienced an eating disorder in the past. So there are some biological factors there that actually make sense, you know, once you know about them. I mean, the emotional risk, as again, you know, maybe this isn't rocket science, but there's some quite easy, you know, quite interesting things here. I mean, one is a sensitivity to stress. Secondly, people who are people pleasers. I reckon this is something I recognise certainly in Sophie, trying hard to please others, an attention to detail. So someone that's very detail focused, even a bit rigid or inflexible in their thought processes, and someone who has a predisposition to develop automatic habits. So someone that perhaps, you know, is fanatical about their, I mean, I suppose exercise would be a good example of that. And maybe someone who has difficulty regulating their emotions. And then we have the social and environmental risks, which are around, again, bullying at school. Some very interesting statistics about that. Apparently, individuals with an eating disorder are 3 times more likely to have experienced bullying or teasing at school, particularly around their appearance. Periods of intense change, such as moving, maybe parents divorcing, new school, bereavement, and so on, and also personal experiences of trauma. So when you think about that, you know, when you think about putting all of those elements together, you know, it is a complex mix of ingredients that come together. And as I say, everybody's story is slightly different. But when you do put these things together, you realise that, you know, the illness gradually takes hold. You know, sometimes it's around that person because a lot of life feels out of control. They're wanting to get more control of life. But over time, you know, the person starts to lose conscious control of that. And they consciously want to be able to do other things, but find that they no longer can when the eating disorder has really taken hold. And Sophie, I don't know, before we move on, if you'd like to comment, you know, on some of those factors, and perhaps, you know, the ones that have really affected you.
I mean, it's like we've said before, I think I've lived with a functioning eating disorder for a very long time. I think mine was predominantly, it was certainly triggered by bullying and teasing in my younger years. But then that being said, with all the research now, it would make sense. It makes a lot of sense to me, and it all fits if the bullying was sort of a trigger to something that was already underlying as a biological factor. So with everything combined, it does make it makes a lot of sense. But that being said, I think there is still a lot that can be done in the world now that could be changed to be a preventative for the next generation being so exposed to the risks of suffering with an eating disorder, such as social media bloggers and influencers out there. I've got a lot to say about that, but that's probably for another session. But yeah, so I think I do agree with a lot of the factors that you've mentioned that could sort of stem an eating disorder, definitely.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Sophie. And I know that you went through a period of a lot of change, you know, at one time in your life when we moved from London to Kent, and you know, your dad and I separated, and all sorts of things were going on. But as I say, that's just part of the story. I mean, the other thing I wanted to address is this issue around, you know, sufferers just need to eat. You know, I think you've had this time after time, haven't you, Sophie? You know, just eat something, you know, and everything will be fine. But there is this this realization that it is a serious illness, and eating disorders. I mean, whether this was a really light bulb moment for me, are associated with significant and structural brain changes. And that might be a surprise to some people on the call. So, you know, the brain is made up of fatty tissue, and if the body's starved, the brain actually size shrinks as well. And so the brain atrophies, and particularly the prefrontal cortex at the front of the brain, which is like the kind of project manager of us, and also, you know, helps us to self-regulate our emotions. So there's a lot of atrophy in the brain, which is why sometimes when sufferers go into medical units, they are not given the opportunity to have any therapy. I mean, sometimes that's down to cost as well, of course, but sometimes it's this realization that until you can get somebody back to a certain body weight, and it's normally around a BMI, I think, isn't it, Sophie, of 15 or 16, that you can start to work with them.
Higher now, they're aiming for 17, 18.
Okay, so it's quite high now, but it does then mean there's this kind of big gap between, you know, putting weight on and actually helping people address what Sophie described earlier as this constant battle in her head. So, and the other thing that's quite interesting is that the research says that the brain change in anorexia is more severe than in any other psychiatric condition. So there's a lot there of interest. The good news is, and I was kind of like, oh, this is good news, is that the brain will restore. So the brain does restore with refeeding. So, you know, after a period of recovery, you wouldn't, if you did an MRI on the brain, you wouldn't actually be able to tell the difference between somebody that has had anorexia or another eating disorder and somebody who hasn't. So, you know, the brain is amazing in terms of regenerating itself, which is really, I think, good news. You know, it's a good story, that part. So, you know, as the sufferer starts to put on weight, then that's the moment that we can start to do some more of the cognitive work with them. But certainly, you know, sufferers don't just need to eat, you know, that, and yet that's the reaction often, you know, particularly in families sometimes, you know, there's a positive intention there. But just saying, well, just eat, you know, and getting very frustrated with a sufferer really doesn't help. And the last point here, which I think again is something that we're recognizing more and more, is that men and boys, the myth, don't get eating disorders, and yet 25% of that 1.25 million that I talked about at the beginning are males. and certainly when Sophie was in a couple of units, there was a lot of guys, and there was an interesting PR campaign. Some of you may have seen it by Beat, you know, the charity, earlier this year, and they had a video that was going out, and the video was about the story of a young adult and her father. And, you know, the assumption was that it was the young female adult that had the eating disorder. And then there was kind of a punchline at the end, which left you suddenly realizing that it wasn't the daughter at all. It was the father that had the eating disorder. So, you know, eating disorders are coming in all shapes and sizes these days. So a lot there to think about. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to hand over to Sophie and just ask Sophie to talk a bit about, because I know most people on the call are here because you're curious. So I know that some of these things are going to be useful to you. So Sophie will talk about, you know, some of the things that you might notice in family members, clients, friends, that would be a bit of a tip off that, you know, perhaps there is something to be concerned about.
Yeah, so I would say, reflecting on my own experience, and I suppose we are no one person with an eating disorder goes through the same journey, but I would definitely say, from my perspective, the initial warning signs would be how that particular person maybe interacts with you if you've had a very close relationship. And they start to, or you notice them starting to withdraw, the conversation starts disappearing, and they start to isolate a lot more, spending time on their own. Their dress sense maybe start to change if their weight's beginning to change. They could start to wear baggier clothing, trying to sort of hide any effects. If they stop participating in social events that might be around food, and they start avoiding things, wanting to be in a lot more control over what they are eating, and where you can possibly go and do your shopping, and things like that. Notice out for change in routines. Are they changing times that they might phone in order to fit that around other rules that they might have brought into their lives? Are they coming across as slightly secretive and having an excuse for things that haven't ever normally been a problem before? And then there are physiological changes as well. If their skin starts to dry, looking tired, hair might start to appear a bit thinner and sort of lose its shine. So that's a few things to start sort of getting your minds thinking about those early warning signs. I don't think I've missed any key ones there, unless there's anything that you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, no, thanks, Soph. I mean, I think when you've had, you know, your kind of bouts of serious anorexia, things like withdrawal, that's probably one of the first things that I notice. You know, finding any excuse not to get involved in things, and also I suppose this compulsive exercise is something that that often, you know, is one of those early tip-offs. And
I suppose the only quick thing I suppose that I did want to add, even though we're predominantly speaking about anorexia, there are other signs or other warning things just to keep an out for maybe early onset signs of other eating disorders that might creep in. It's are they able to sit down after a meal, or is there reasons to rush off and not stay seated? That could be a sign of possible sort of purging behaviours coming into play. Yeah, that was just another little thing that I wanted to add, as sometimes the two sides of that can start working together, especially if somebody's predominantly portrayed anorexic tendencies. If that starts to get caught out and challenged, it may then invite other methods of controlling.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sophie. And I remember many times standing outside bathroom doors trying to listen in and see what I could hear going on. Yeah, no, thanks for that. So a few ideas there about things to watch out for, and it might just be a feeling. You know, if you've got an intuition that something isn't going well, then that's probably the moment to start intervening. And again, I know that the majority of you are curious, but I just wondered, you know, those of you that have had experience of being around people with an eating disorder, you know, what you might have noticed. And this is just a free text piece. So if you've got anything that you'd like to share, that would be interesting for us. So let's see if anybody has got something. I'll just give you a few moments. Any thoughts there? I think we may have had a sufferer on. So, you know, if there's something, and if there's anything there that you'd like to share with us, that would be helpful. Yeah, extreme control over eating patterns. Yeah. Yes, you know, you can notice sometimes in the beginning, early days, that people start to get very finicky, you know, about what they eat, and that can kind of also manifest in terms of them wanting to start cooking their own food, not wanting other people in the kitchen, you know, when they're cooking. So secrecy, yeah, that's a big one. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. The closer you are to the person, the later you might realise. Friend's daughter started exercising vigorously. Right, okay. Yeah, comment on them wanting to eat alone in their room, or saying, I've already eaten. You know, you might not have any evidence about that, but saying that they've already had their meal. Obsessed about clothes, bad-tempered after eating. Yeah, and then disappearing into the bathroom. Yeah, and often meal times just becoming a complete nightmare. Right, okay. Eating in secrecy. Yeah, that's Sophie, you might want to comment on that one about working with an adolescent who had an eating disorder. And she said she enjoyed feeling so hungry, and it would be a reward for her if she managed to go all day without eating. And the fainting feeling meant she was doing really well. And that's a great example of that battle, isn't it, that goes on in your head.
Yeah, no, and definitely. And I wouldn't, I mean, yeah, I guess, or it's I mean, for me, I would never say that I would have called it a reward, but maybe it was, but it was sort of like you'd beaten it for the day, so it was sort of like a yes, I've achieved something. But even though deep down, really, when in self, and now knowing what I know, I would never say that I would probably want to feel happy about that feeling again. But definitely a brilliant example of how it can make you feel, and the sort of the buzz that it can give you, and that feeling of accomplishment at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And certainly this last one about language, we're going to talk a bit about this later on, but I call them the bear traps. You know, I mean, I've fallen into a bear trap many times when, you know, as a kind of mum, thinking you're giving a positive comment, but actually having the opposite effect. And as I say, we're going to talk a bit more about that later on. I'm just going to stop. Yeah, stop
Yeah,
sharing
sorry.
a second.
We have a question.
Yeah.
We have a hand raised from Patty Schmidt. Is that okay to ask that now?
Yes, fine. Yeah, Patty.
Yeah, more than a question. The thing is that I've worked with food for all my life, and I do dieting, I do nutrition, and very specific also. And the worst thing is that you can see that there is a problem when they come from for a diet, especially adolescents. And they say, "Oh, I need to lose here," or "I need to do," I need. That is such a big signal, not just for anorexia, also for bulimia, for overeating, undereating, whatever, vomiting, teeth. There are so many things we can spot, but when it's very near to us, it's really hard to see. That is so. It is sad because, you know, we love our beloved ones, but we don't see how they suffer. That is a pity. But it mostly starts with the diet, because then they see social pressure, school bullying, what Sophie said. Those are all triggers. And then they come home and they start not eating, and then they say, "Mom, I need a diet." Okay, and mom says, "Okay, let's go to a dietitian," right? And then, but the dietitian looks at the child and says, "How old are you?" 13. "Okay, you don't need a diet, you need to eat." But then you give them a diet so that they eat, right? That's what I do.
Yeah.
It is difficult, and the parent doesn't realize that that is the start of an eating disorder. And really have to point it out because they don't realize.
Yeah.
And
It's
yeah.
true.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Patty. And that's why, you know, we like to share our thoughts about, you know, what should you be watching out for? Because, you know, the word need, must, have to, you know, in NLP terms, we call them modal operators of necessity, and that they are tip-offs as well, that there's something underlying that. And yeah, but it's interesting though, because also we know from the research I talked about that, you know, it's not like everybody that has an eating disorder. So there is this kind of predisposition, and you know, it's again, that's another area to watch out for. If your loved one or the person you're working with, you know, ticks a number of those boxes. I mean, Sophie, did you want to add anything?
It's so difficult, especially because I haven't been in the position of the other side. I can only go from what I feel it must be like. And I would just say, if it is a loved one or somebody very close to you, just keep doing what you're doing, and keeping your eye open and keeping on top of it, because at some point they will appreciate it. But like you said, sometimes if a person is that close to you, it can be very, very difficult to pick up those signs, and the role of the eating disorder can be very, very vindictive and secretive, like others have mentioned in the poll and the free writing, and it will do whatever it takes in order to keep that control. So I guess, yeah, just as family members, loved ones, where you can, just watch out and challenge it where possible, without becoming overbearing and over challenging and then pushing those people away. Which there's a very fine line that I can only imagine is very, very difficult not to cross either way. So it must feel impossible for supporters at times to know what to do for the best.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we'll talk a bit more about that when we want to move and have a look at our ideas about the approach. But certainly for us, Sophie, you know, it's felt like walking a tightrope sometimes. And I think I agree with you, Patty, particularly if you work in the area of therapy, of whatever kind, or you're a coach, and you've got a loved one in the family. I know for me personally, it was like, well, I'm going to fix this, and then the realization, and I guess the admission to myself in the end, that actually we needed to understand more about what was going on before we could use any of my tools to be able to help fix it, or to support Sophie to fix herself. As she will always tell me, it must come from her. Of course, it must always come from our clients. So I'm going to go back into the slides. So thank you for that. And what I want to do now is I want to kind of move into the work that we've been doing. As I say, it's early days, but I hope you'll find it helpful. I mean, we've been putting together this approach. It's based on a therapeutic approach for change, although we've adapted it for the eating disorder setting. But it runs through 5 stages, and the ongoing is always learning. There is no failure, only feedback, right? We get that from NLP. And what I want to do is I want to just give you a flavor of how we're using NLP in each of the stages. And then I want to come back and specifically have a look at stage 1 in a bit more detail, because that was what we were talking about just now with Patty. How do you get people that are very resistant to start even thinking about making a change and doing something differently? So let's have a look at, and as I say, it's developing. Stage 1, we call it resisting change. It's very much around building rapport, pacing and leading, but as I say, I'll come back to that. Stage 2 is really where somebody is at least thinking about change. We call it an awareness of change. And here we're looking at, how do we, as NLPers in particular, help someone build a motivation towards change. Because perhaps something I should have said as well is that this approach, it looks like it's lovely and linear. Of course it isn't. You will go back, the sufferer will go backwards and forwards. It feels like a roller coaster, and they might get to even facing change or taking some action, and then it's like, oh, it's too much, and go back some steps. What we've learned is that, there's always a bit of a shift. So even if sometimes it feels like 2 steps forward and 1 step back, it's still 1 step forward, right? So it still kind of moves them in the right direction. But awareness of change, and I think we learn a lot in NLP that can help people in this area, in terms of shifting focus towards what life could be like without the illness. And for a lot of sufferers, there is a lot, as Sophie mentioned the word identity earlier. There's a big identity connection here, and so there's a lot, and often secondary gain, which we describe like the benefits of the illness. I mean, I was in a room a couple of years ago now where the benefits of the change, where there was almost an uproar amongst parents to even suggest there was any benefit of having an eating disorder. Of course, though, to the sufferer, there are benefits. It's about keeping control, regulating emotions. There's a lot of things there, actually. So, shifting focus towards what life could be like without the illness, and building a strong why, can take some time. But we have worked a lot on creating a vision board and using towards motivation, but also sometimes away from motivation. What that person actually wants to avoid. And sometimes, reminding them about what going into hospital is really like, so if they don't move forwards, that's the away from motivation. And certainly I remember when you, Sophie, came out from your first placement, and you said to me, well, I'm never doing that again. So it's not a pleasant, I don't know if that's the right word, but it's not an environment that you would choose to go into. And also assessing their readiness to change. And again, you know, these stages can take some time. You know, they're not something that you kind of fix in one session. And it's really standing or pacing that person and just keeping them moving forwards gradually. Stage 3, we talk about facing change. So the person has gone through resisting, they've now motivated, they're actually facing up to some change. And we call this the game changer stage, actually, because one of the things that we've worked on a lot, haven't we, Sophie, and has been very useful, is to start. I mean, Sophie talked earlier about what her day is like, and that voice in her head, you know, telling her what to do. And I think you mentioned that you have to walk so far, you know, before you could even do anything at the start of the day. And so we call those the eating disorder rules, or which of course generate behaviour. And as the supporter and as the coach or therapist, you know, in a way, that's where we really need to understand those rules, because they are governing and driving that person's everyday existence. And one of the things that we talk about in NLP, which is very useful, is to use logical levels of therapy. And for those of you that know that, great. You know, those of you that haven't come across it, it's where you ask you say to you make it fun of it, actually, and you say to that person, right, you know, you're going away for 2 weeks holiday, and I'm going to be you. You know, the agency have sent me in to replace you. So how am I going to be you? You know, you have to teach me how to be you from when you get up in the morning to when you go to bed at night. And I want to know what's going on. You know, what are you saying to yourself? I want to know how you're feeling. And I want to know what you're actually doing. You know, what are the behaviours that you're doing during the day? And this began to really flush out, you know, the cycle around, you know, the daytime cycle, the routine that Sophie was in. And certainly it's something that we've used with other sufferers as well. And we find it gives a really good way in to then, you know, do something with those particular rules. And Sophie, do you want to add anything, you know, about some of the rules that, because some of them are conscious, but a lot of them are unconscious, you know, for the sufferer. Do you want to say anything about what you learned, you know, when we were going through a lot of this work?
Yeah, I think I remember the first time that somebody asked me to write my rules, and my initial reaction was, well, I don't have any rules. I just do what I do. And they said, well, no, you must do. And then I started to write them. And I think initially I must have come up with nearly an A4 piece of paper with every rule that every day I had to abide by to make my day go at least semi-okay. But I mean, my rules varied from, it was varying things. It was the exercise, times of day I was allowed to eat, in what order I was allowed to eat, what cutlery I used, making it impossible to, like, if I didn't have certain cutlery, then I wasn't allowed to eat, what time I was allowed to shower. Like it's varying, yeah, varying different things, but it's astonishing, actually, just to sit with yourself for a little while and sort of go, oh, well, what rules do I have that maybe not you necessarily need to get rid of, but that you would like to consciously work on, that actually sort of put a barrier in the way of you living your life, as opposed to making it more pleasurable on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, thanks, Soph. And we also found that it wasn't something you could just jump in immediately. You know, the other phases, you have to really build this awareness and build this kind of openness to change before, you know, you can jump into starting to talk about the rules of the game, you know, the rules of the illness. But that's very much stage 3. And then stage 4, we talk about actioning, so creating person-centered interventions. And here it's very much working with the sufferer, because they need to be, well, should need modal operators of necessity. It's important here. They must be fully motivated to make some change. So, you can't design those changes for them. It must come from them. What are they willing to work on? And for everybody, that will be slightly different. But we have found, I mean, you can, so in some of the books, quite interesting, some of the books, it says, no, you must go cold turkey and stop all exercise. Our experience has been a bit different to that. And certainly the experience of other sufferers and supporters that we have spoken to, we found it works better to create baby steps around one of the rules, but to have some quite specific goals. So, for example, one of those might be around exercise, and it could be, that those baby steps. I mean, let's take for an example, the person is walking 30,000 steps before breakfast. I mean, that's just one example. But it could be, that actually getting their agreement just to reduce a tiny amount every day, could even be a few hundred steps, doesn't matter. It's building that plan and taking those baby steps forward, whatever those baby steps might be. If it's changing the time of eating, it might be, just literally moving it by a few minutes every day until you reach that particular goal. And that certainly has worked well for you, hasn't it, Sophie, and worked well for the other people that we have, explored this with. Yeah, I think rather than just saying stop, it's because the thing is, these rules, they serve an important function for the sufferer. They are the way that they stim themselves. It's the way that they keep themselves going during the day. So if you remove one of those and just shut it down, then guess what? You're likely to send them into more of a fearful place than you may have done. Certainly, it's kind of like counterproductive. We felt it's really important to keep accountability with the sufferer. In NLP terms, keep them at calls, because these things don't always work well. So, if one day it all goes to pot, then, what do they need to learn from that? And how do they do things differently the next day? And Sophie, you're always very clear that, every day is a new opportunity. So even if yesterday didn't go that well, doesn't matter. Today we start again, and that has been really important. And Sophie, perhaps you'd say a little bit about this grounding technique that you found particularly helpful.
So the one thing that I do find really helpful is, so at home, I've created a sort of safe space. So when things do get a bit too much, I take myself to my safe chair, and that is my grounding chair. When I need to come back to self, and I need to sort of differentiate myself between all the different voices in order to be able to then come back and continue to challenge the eating disorder. But grounding can look different for everyone. For me, I know that journaling helps. I've got varying different sensory things, different smells, playing a little game of Yahtzee with, like, on your own, and then there's the sort of the 5 senses, 5 things that you can feel, that you can touch, that you can taste, smell, see. But I just think giving yourself that time out for at least sort of 2 minutes, even if it's just 2 minutes breathing, so that you can come back to your sort of yourself and logical mind, in order to go, right, which part of me is wanting me to act on compulsivity more so than anything else, and how can you then go back and I don't necessarily want to say challenge it, but what opposite action can you take that's for you instead of the eating disorder moving forwards for the rest of the day?
Yeah, good. And just resetting, isn't it, really? So
Yeah.
it's been, and I know one of the things that we said earlier is, you know, when you start to get some success is how do you sustain that change and build on that change, and you know, cultivating hope. I wrote a blog about that this week, and you know, those glimmers of hope every day, I know, is something that Sophie works on and journals. And they're not the big things, they're the little things like you know, having a nice walk with the dog, or you know, going out and enjoying the sunshine.
If you want, do you want me to add to a bit
Yeah,
to my little glimmers? So
yeah.
yeah, glimmers can be absolutely anything. Whatever that may be. I mean, like we've touched on, I've been in various treatment settings, but it's that thought that there is always something to be happy and grateful for within the day, however hard or tragic that day may seem. There's always something, and it's like, for me, one big thing, if I start the day and I don't feel brilliant, I really appreciate the fact that I'm at home and I've got the autonomy to go and put the kettle on, because I know in a different setting I wouldn't be able to have a cup of coffee in the morning. So I would then, that's my start, that's my glimmer start of the day. And it's just being really grateful to have that freedom there to be able to do that. And then if I go out in nature, it's about being really mindful in nature. And it's like, I might say to myself, right, the thing that I really want to find today is, I'm really thankful I live 5-minute walk from the beach, but I really want to find a sparkly stone, and I'll go on the beach and I'll hunt a stone, but then I'll take a picture of the stone. And on my phone, I need to take one picture a day of something that's made me smile. So when I do get into a bit of a bad, like the one album that I go back to is my glimmer album. And I know the only pictures in there are things that have made me smile. So yeah, I collect my glimmers, and that's, yeah, without going on about it too much, they make me happy. Sorry.
Yeah, no, good. No, absolutely no need to apologize. So yeah, so sustaining and finding these strategies to support are so important. Remember, you know, there is no failure, only feedback. So all the time, you know, what have we learned from what's happening? And we've always got the relapse plan, just in case. And the relapse plan can have things like, you know, what are things to again, tip-offs. You know, what's tip-off in case things are starting to deteriorate. And the research says that when somebody's been in the unit, the first 60 days when they come home are really critical in terms of sustaining the routine they've got in terms of their eating. And I did say at the beginning, I wanted just to explore stage one in a bit more detail, and we'll have a look at, in particular, around language. But this is this resistance stage, you know, and Patty was giving some of her experiences earlier as well. You know, it can be, if you're somebody that, you know, you're a supporter of any kind, it can be so frustrating because, you know something needs to change. Your loved one, your friend, your client may not even recognize that yet. So it's really building rapport, connection at this stage is important. You know, you're not telling them what to do. No, you're literally just pacing, leading, listening, you know, walking alongside with patience. And it does take patience, I can tell you. You know, showing curiosity. Well, how is that important? How do you do this? How do you do that? You know, lots of open questions, finding common ground. As we said, you know, building a strong why that starts to get that person to consider that life could be a bit different to how they've been experiencing it, and to start using some NLP language patterns to build connection. And we talked earlier about somebody put on one of the responses, you know, that you think you're doing a good thing by being positive and saying, well, gosh, you look good, or, you know, great, I can see you put on a bit of weight, and then you get this reaction. And you think, well, that's, you know, the meaning of the communication is the response you get. And you think, well, that's not what I was expecting at all. And then, you know, I call them the bear traps. So just something about bear traps, because you know, I've learned a lot, and over the years, and on the left hand side, we've got some of the what not to say, you know, what not to say, and then we've got some of the things that are more helpful to say, and, you know, anything that and if you actually comment on what you need to do, that's interesting as well, because often the sufferer will take that as giving them permission. So if you say, I need to go on a diet, or I'm so full, I won't eat again for days, or I've stopped eating, whatever it is, it, in a way, it's true, isn't it, Sophie? We've learned this, and it gives you, it's the way your brain is working. It gives you permission then to model, you know, or to do what that other person is doing.
Yeah, or you also on the other side, it's sort of like if somebody out there's, oh, I've not eaten all day, and then if the sufferer is actively working at changing their habits, and they have, the intense guilt and shame that they would then feel about the fact that they have eaten already that day, would then lead to possible other behaviors later on in the day or whatever. It's such a difficult.
It's complicated, you know, but these are some of the things that we have learned, you know, things like, oh, I can't believe how much you had for lunch. Well done, you know, saying well done. And I know to my, I suppose from us, you know, certainly I've had short shrift back quite a lot, Sophie, haven't I? When I've tried, you know, I've really by a positive intention of giving you, you know, something that I think is a good thing, but you know, it's come straight back at me. And can you just say something, Soph, about, you know, when people do use positive language, like, you know, oh, I can see you've put on weight, or great, you've eaten a wonderful meal, you know, how does that land with you?
I think definitely the likes of, oh, you look good, that your brain will automatically go to, oh, they're just telling me that I've put on weight. That's all the brain will initially go to. So I guess it's thinking about what you could say instead, like, oh, your hair's looking really good, or like, have you had a haircut? It looks really good. So it's sort of, you're telling people that they're looking better, but in a roundabout way that probably couldn't go under the misconception of you've gained weight. It's not about their body shape or size. Your eyes look shiny. I mean, the well done thing, I don't know how else that could be phrased. If somebody in recovery or is wanting to get onto recovery completes a meal, it doesn't really need to be discussed. You wouldn't say well done to a normal person or a person without an eting disorder at a table. Well done for eating your dinner. So I think it's just the little things to be aware of, and how things could be taken in the wrong context. But I do also think, I mean, especially for myself, I know that over time, even though it can be a little bit triggering and it is frustrating, you do appreciate that whatever anybody close to you says is not being said out of malice. It is being said with the right intention. It's just the way that you take it. Yeah, but it's I think as well, it must be so difficult, because one thing that you may say as a supporter one day might get taken really well, and then 2 days later you say the exact same thing, and it lands with like a tragic accident has just happened, and there's a huge retaliation to it. So I think it is very much so trial and error, and every sufferer, I guess, would have their individual stance on that.
Yeah, I mean, some ideas on the right hand side are some ideas, and interestingly, something from the Maudsley method. I mean, the Maudsley produce a lot of really good stuff for the areas around communicating with people with eating disorders. But it's the OARS. It's easy for me to remember the OARS. Some of them are a bit more complicated, but it stands for open and curious, giving affirmations, reflecting on what's been said, and summarizing. So, you know, instead, we've got some examples here. Be curious. How can I help? What would you like to do next? What is it helpful for me to say? I mean, that's a brilliant one, actually, when you've fallen in several bear traps, is to ask the person, you know, how would you like me to respond to what's going on? You've got this. Nice affirmation. I'm so proud of how courageous you are. It was so brave of you to tell me, whatever that it might be. Sounds like you are feeling. Is that right? You know, reflecting. Thank you for telling me how you're feeling. Is it okay if I share my observations? That's another one that I think is a very useful one, because sometimes the sufferer doesn't want to hear, you know, so ask permission. From what you've told me, I know you're finding it whatever this week, and let me check, have I got this right? So, you know, these are some of the more helpful things that you can put to a sufferer. And one of the things that we know is that in NLP terms, people with an eating disorder, they create lots of complex equivalencies. So one thing means something else, particularly around all these rules. And, you know, and we can use our language to start getting underneath that a little bit. So we're going to get you to do something now. I think if we do it, Cash, literally for about, shall we say 7 minutes?
Okay. I'll put everyone into a breakout room. If you don't go into a breakout room, please await for me to come and move you to a breakout room where someone is, and I'll do that as quickly as I can.
Yeah, and it's in pairs, and we just thought it'd be useful to share your experiences and come up with a couple of questions that that you might be able to put in your toolkit to use with somebody that you know.
Okay, here we go. Thank you.
Okay.
Back.
Brilliant. Welcome back, everybody. Yeah, we're just, I suppose we're curious, you know, curious about some of your conversations and maybe some of the ideas that you had. I just wondered if anybody would like to share. Just to give us a little summary of what you talked about. I know they're only very...
Yeah, I'll happily share.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So we were talking, I just went on my experience of working with a young girl with an eating disorder, and we were taught solution focused, and so that was what I used with her. So we focused on where she wanted to be in 5 years' time, what she wanted her life to be like, down to, you know, what she'd be doing at college, and, you know, what car she's going to get eventually, or her job. And we just worked towards where she wanted to be. We also used some techniques like we did the change behavior, when you model. We did some NLP techniques and stuff like that, but we just focused on where she wanted to be. We did look at what would life be like in 5 years' time if you carried on like this. And I was saying to the girls in the group that at the time, I think a young lady had sadly died from an eating disorder, Nikki Graham. She's quite famous.
Right, yeah.
And so we spoke about her and what her, you know, how that, you know, if she did carry on, that could be. But and she said, no, I don't want that, I want that. And we just built on that, where she wanted to be, and we worked towards. And I did have quite, I was quite successful actually. She's better. Yeah.
Good. Excellent.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally, we would always choose to work towards, and build a strong why with an individual. I know that occasionally with Sophie, a bit of a wavefrom in term, particularly if somebody has already had a hospital admission, because they're pretty brutal. If you know of anybody that has had one, but certainly, having that vision for the future. And Sophie, maybe you'd like to say something, because I know, you have your vision board, and that keeps you going a lot of the time, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, and I mean, I love my vision boards, and I find them so helpful. But sometimes when it's very difficult, like I've definitely learned to crunch down onto goals that are realistic in the very short term and not just on the long term, because you want to be able to start achieving them. And then I do think as well, there was like, I do have little epiphanies that are away from where I might hear something and I'm like, oh, that's what I really don't want. And then that's my motivation. But they're not, I don't see it as a negative thing, but yeah, it's different.
Yeah, I think what you said about the short-term goals as well, sometimes being really important, just getting you through that day,
Yeah.
so that you can, dust yourself down and start again the next day. But no, it's great, Emma. I'm really happy. It's brilliant that you had good results with your client. That's what we want to hear. Anybody?
I will say, I think I caught her very early because
Right.
Mum was very, very, she needs help, she needs help, she needs help.
Yeah.
And I was a bit unsure because she was like, I'm fine, I'm fine. But I think it was very early. It was just peer pressure. A few of her friends were doing it at school. So it was very, very early. I will say that I caught her right. Yeah.
And that's brilliant. All the research says that the earlier you can catch it, and that's why these kind of early signs are so important. But the earlier you can catch it, the easier and the faster, you will resolve the situation. Anybody else or any other questions that anybody had? Because we were going to go into questions next. So any feedback or questions that anybody would like to share or ask? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I can't figure out how to put my hand up, but I do have a question.
Go for it, Karen.
It was just something fascinating you said right at the beginning around the structural brain changes. And so were you saying that below a certain BMI, it might be difficult for some NLP techniques to actually land with the person suffering?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I think you do get some people who are quite high functioning with eating disorder. I mean, Sophie is a good example of that. She had a very responsible HR role before she had her first admission. Yeah, I mean, people will have known that she was skinny, but she was functioning. However, if you read the research, what it says is that anybody that's a very low BMI, Sophie was saying nowadays they're talking about BMI of 17 or over to start the therapy, which is quite high in a way. But certainly the research would suggest, as I say, I think it depends on the individual and how high functioning they are. But certainly they would suggest that if you do the work with them very early on, they haven't got the cognitive ability because of the brain atrophy to be able to work in a kind of effective way. But I think it's a huge generalization, and I wouldn't necessarily discard that, until they get to a particular BMI, because I know that Sophie, you've always done some useful work, haven't you, as you've been throughout the whole of your recovery. But on the whole, that's what the research would suggest.
Thank you. Yeah. And just I've got tons of questions, but I'll just ask one more in case other people want to come in. Lindsey, were you Sophie's NLP coach, or was there another NLP coach, Sophie, that you worked with? Because obviously you've got a very close mother-daughter relationship. Is that possibly
Was that
kind of in
specifically
conflict?
with my eating disorder recovery?
Yeah.
No, I've not worked with Lindsey / mum on my own recovery. It's a
Right.
bit too too close, I think.
Yeah.
What
but
we have done, Karen, is we have worked together on the approach.
Right.
Yeah.
We've reflected on all of our experiences, and you know, the way that Sophie's worked with other coaches and some therapists, the work that I've done, and then kind of pulled out the process that we felt would be most helpful and kind of tested it against each other.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Having said that, of course, you know, there's always blurry lines. You know, I can't just switch off my NLP experience, you know, so all the time when I'm asking Sophie questions, perhaps as mum, you know, I'm asking them in a way that I probably would ask a client. You know, it's just impossible for me to stop that.
Yeah, thank you.
Patty, I think Patty's got her hand up.
Yeah, I was about to say, the fact that you are so close is beneficial in one way, but in another way, it can interfere with another professional that is more objective. And so, yes, we do speak Milton language because we do. That's quite common. It is a form of our mind that changes doing the job we do. But the thing is, you can use your Milton language, but you need always to be careful and be in synchrony with what the professional does, because otherwise the sufferer find themselves in the middle of two different approaches, or the approach might be the same, but the technique might be different, and that can destabilize. So yes, kudos to you that you try not to interfere, not to.
Again, I do use the word try because it's impossible to switch it off completely.
Yeah, that's very not NLP, huh? Try.
I know, but you know, you just do it. You just do your best, really. You do the best you can, you know, with the resources that you have. I mean, Sophie at the moment has people that from Kent County Council, where she lives, you know, has people that are helping her, and I'm very much at a distance from that. Having said that, of course, I'm curious, you know, what's going on and what's happening and what goals have you got at the moment? So, you know, that's how we work together.
I think I'm very good at boundaries as well. So when you do try and overstep, I know I'm very good at saying enough.
Yeah.
For it.
Definitely. Okay, let's just a couple
to
more
both of
things.
you.
Yeah, a couple more things before we finish. So let's just go back into the slides. Yeah, so we were just curious, you know, what are your takeaways from this session? What are some of the things? Because that's, you know, as we're developing this approach, you know, it's very useful to know what you found most helpful. There's always a little bit of a lag time while the ideas come through. Let's hope some things are coming through. I can see people typing, so here we go. Brilliant.
No, thank you.
I think that's one of the things that's been so illuminating, you know, is to get into the mindset of what's really going on. Yeah, NLP, good.
Yeah, logical levels of therapy will be very useful.
And of course, there's lots more from NLP that we can use as well. You know, we've shared the things that that we are focusing around. And we will be talking at the conference next year. So we're really looking forward to that, being on the stage and having developed the process even further. Because what we're going to be doing is working and supporting, training coaches, other professionals, supporters, loved ones, and even, you know, we've got this idea about actually supporters coming with their loved ones on some trainings. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, I'm just going to move because we've got about 2 minutes more to go. If you want to find out, I mean, there's not an awful lot on the website yet, but if you want to find us, just email info@teamnlp.co.uk and it will find us, and then we can respond. The website is www.teamnlp.co.uk, because we run an NLP business, so the other NLP courses on there, and we will be adding this as time goes on. I just wanted to hand back to Sophie for the final word.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, here's Sophie's vision board.
Yeah, so this is my vision board, and I just just welcome you all just to take a minute again, like we did at the very start of the workshop. Either shut your eyes or just take a minute to reflect inwards. So if you remember me saying, I was really lucky. Somebody did answer that call in my desperate hour of need. And following on from that, the help did come. I had 2 hospital admissions and a very intensive course of online treatment, and it was all absolutely terrifying. But I fought my way through it. I fought through the ideas of losing my grip on the only reality that I had ever known. But somewhere very deep within me, something stronger than all of the voices whispered back, just keep going. There is more to a life than a life lived in constraint and ritual and rules. 3 years ago, everything did start to shift. The recovery journey that I entered onto became very real. It was messy, it was painful, but it soon turned into my reality. It meant breaking all the rules that I once lived by, questioning thoughts that I'd once trusted, and choosing again and again to believe in a different future. The voice didn't disappear overnight, and it still lingers with me today, waiting for quiet moments to creep back in. Only now I meet it with something that I never expected I would be able to, and that's strength and determination. I still wake up with the echoes, but now they are just that. They're echoes, they're not commands. I'm able to go out on walks, not because I must or because I'm living up to an eating disorder, but because I choose to. I don't eat anymore just to survive, but I am able to eat to live. And I'm rebuilding the parts of myself that were once hidden beneath the fear. I am not yet free, but I'm no longer captive to my eating disorder. And the truth is that recovery is not a straight line. It never, ever will be. But every day that I choose to show up, I'm drawing a new one. Every time I reach out instead of giving in, I'm building something stronger than the voices ever were. And even when everything feels impossible, I continue to move forwards. Because my freedom isn't the absence, it doesn't come with the absence of struggle, but it's the presence of having the choice. And I promise myself and all of you that there is life beyond a voice, a life that's filled with glimmers, fresh air on your face, laughter that catches you by surprise, morning coffees in peace and quiet, your own reflections slowly becoming something softer. I was never meant to live in fear, and there's always more for the future. So if today is the day that I take my first step, you take your first step, or if you can help somebody else to take that step, all I ask is that you take it and then just keep going. None of us are alone. It's never the fact that anyone is too far gone, and everyone deserves to be free. Thank you all for being here with us today.
Thank you, so. Yeah, so Cash, back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for attending today. I hope you found it as insightful and interesting as I have. It's amazing. It's a subject that's also close to me. Thank you particularly to Lindsey and Sophie for delivering this today. Sophie, for your vulnerability, for your honesty, your willingness to be a modelling project. Lindsey, for the support, for your honesty, and for wanting to share the learnings that you've found from this to help others. Yes, you said you'll be at the conference, and hopefully the book will be completed and published by then, so that everyone can find out a bit more about that then. And thank you very much again, and we look forward to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.